Welcome to James Joyce's divine and delirious comedy, Finnegans Wake. In this episode, number 25, we'll hear Irish-Canadian actor and my good friend and colleague Richard Harte performing pages 109 to 114 from Chapter 5 of Joyce's last novel. I'm Adam Seelig, the director of the reading you'll soon hear. This episode is releasing on July the 2nd of 2026, so I'd like to wish all the Canadian listeners out there a happy belated Canada Day, and to the Americans, a happy early 4th of July. Finnegans Wake is a production of One Little Goat Theatre Company. One Little Goat is filming and recording all 17 chapters, roughly 30 hours, of Joyce's Finnegans Wake before live audiences in various locations, screening and releasing them along the way with the aim of completing the entire book for its 90th birthday, May 4th, 2029. One Little Goat Theatre Company is an official charity in Canada and the United States. To help us produce this first-of-its-kind filmed reading series, of which we've filmed 8 chapters so far with 9 more to go, please visit onelittlegoat.org to make a charitable donation. Your donation enables us to bring this production to audiences and helps support the outstanding artists who make it possible. To be the first to hear about our live tapings, events, and screenings, please join our mailing list, also at onelittlegoat.org. Boston, Massachusetts is the birthplace of the Irish-American folk song that gives Finnegans Wake its title. It's also the origin of the letter at the heart of Chapter 5 and of today's excerpt, the letter written by A.L.P. that will, she hopes, clear the name of her publicly maligned spouse H.C.E. But was it in fact written by A.L.P.? This mystery will continue to haunt Chapter 5 right up to the chapter's very last line. Today's excerpt begins by focusing on the envelope of the letter, asking us if anyone has ever, quote, looked sufficiently longly at a quite everyday-looking stamped addressed envelope. Well, if you haven't, you're about to, because, as the text tells us, an envelope is to a letter what underwear is to the naked body. It's far more suggestive than you may have thought. We then return to our trusted hen, Belinda, who has pecked out and picked out the letter from a dump of litter, a littery letter that might even hold up as literature. Remember, and if you don't, Finnegans Wake now reminds us, some of Ireland's greatest treasures were discovered in even muckier contexts, like the Ardagh Chalice, the 1,100-year-old gold, silver, bronze, brass, and pewter cup discovered accidentally in 1868 by 2 boys, Jim Quinn and Paddy Flanagan, who were simply digging in the dirt for potatoes. So too the Book of Kells, Ireland's extraordinary literary treasure, was discovered 1,000 years ago hidden under, you guessed it, a pile of dirt. The Book of Kells will come up later in this chapter in more detail, and I've posted in the transcript for this podcast episode an image of the Ardagh Chalice. The real thing is on display at the National Museum of Ireland. Now, on page 111, we get to hear the letter itself. Like most letters, it was mailed from somewhere, in this case, quote, Boston, Mass. Like most letters, it is dated, in this case, quote, the last of the first, or the last day of the first month, i.e. the 31st of January. And like most letters, it begins with the word dear. But who is the addressee? Here's where the dream language of the Wake, true to form, becomes playfully elusive. Quote, dear whom it proceeded to mention, close quote. Based on these first words, the addressee appears to be nameless. But the very next word is the name Maggie. Quote, dear whom it proceeded to mention Maggie, close quote. So is the letter written to Maggie? Well, the very next words give us, quote, dear whom it proceeded to mention Maggie well and all at home's health well, etc., etc. If the letter had any commas, we could have determined to whom it's addressed. but as it flows punctuationlessly, we can only guess at where its first comma might have gone. Was ALP's intention, if indeed ALP wrote the letter, was her intention, quote, "Dear whom it proceeded to mention, comma, Maggie well and all at home's health well," etc.? Or was the intention, quote, "Dear whom it proceeded to mention Maggie, comma, well and all at home's health well," etc.? Without that vital comma, the wake, always open to possibilities, ever rich in ambiguity, keeps its options open. Here's a quick preview of Richard Harte setting up and reading the letter in today's excerpt.
Goodish size sheet of letter paper. Originating by transshipped from Boston, Mass. Of the last of the first two, dear, whom it proceeded to mention, Maggie well, and all at home's health well, only the hate toward the mild on the Van Houtens and the General's elections, with a lovely face of some born gentleman, with a beautiful present of wedding cakes for dear, thank you, Christy, and with grand fun for all of poor Father Michael. Don't forget.
I'll save the rest so you can hear it all in context, but what you can probably already gather from this sample is that the letter, perhaps reflecting the pile of litter in which Belinda the hen found it, is a jumble of epistolary tropes, including news from home with reports on the weather, people's health, current events, a wedding, a funeral, or in the language of the wake, a fun-for-all, echoing Tim Finnegan's funeral in the Irish-American folk song, "Lots of fun at Finnegan's wake." For me, the letter is an auditory equivalent of the cubist paintings and collages of Picasso and Braque, especially those that include scattered snippets of newspaper text. I'll post some of these images in the podcast transcript. Picasso and Braque's cubist works never give us a whole autonomous story from Le Journal, but they certainly convey the experience of taking in the newspaper in bits and pieces. Similarly, the letter of the wake may not give us a whole autonomous story from Boston, but it certainly conveys through collage the personal experience of writing and receiving news from Irish America. Collage, cubism, bricolage, composite. There are numerous ways to describe the style of the letter, but perhaps pastiche comes closest, because Joyce felt it fitting once in his own personal correspondence, which perhaps disappointingly includes proper punctuation, to describe himself as a cut-and-paste author. Quote, "I am quite content to go down to posterity as a scissors-and-paste man, for that seems to me a harsh but not unjust description." And while Picasso and Braque's works often picture a bottle of wine or beer near their newspapers, the wake prefers tea, choosing to put it on the very letter itself. Quite literally, the only punctuation mark in the letter is at the end, where, in lieu of a conventional period, we find a big tea stain, or in the language of the wake, a, quote, large-looking tash of ch. The stain and that a tea stain, close quote. For all my comparisons of the letter to cubism, the wake itself in the next paragraph likens it to viewing a photograph of a horse whose negative melted while under development. Blurry, in other words, and hard to make out, likely because of the time the letter spent buried under sod. We're then treated to a brief cameo by the recurring character Kate, who, as HCE and ALP's charwoman, is well accustomed to dealing with muck. Kate made her first of many appearances back in Chapter 1 as the mock tour guide of the Musi Room, and you'll quickly recognize her in today's excerpt when you hear her single-syllable signature, tip, a word that also resonates with the pile of trash in which the letter turned up. The following paragraph opens with a short, rousing sentence, quote, "Lead, kindly fowl," close quote, and goes on to champion womankind, reminding us that women have always led the way for men. Coincidentally, 10 days before we filmed and recorded this reading of Chapter 5 back in October of 2024, former American President Barack Obama, during the fierce presidential election between Donald Trump, a man, and Kamala Harris, a woman, urged black American males to vote for Harris in a way that meshed perfectly with this paragraph in the wake. As Obama put it, quote, "Women in our lives have been getting our backs this entire time. When we get in trouble and the system isn't working for us, they're the ones out there marching and protesting." Sounds a lot like ALP coming to HCE's defense. The next paragraph focuses on ALP's writing of her letter, telling us repeatedly about what, quote, "schwrites," close quote, or what she writes. And this epistolary paragraph includes the fifth of the Wake's 10 Thunderwords, those extraordinary 100-letter words comprised of multilingual phonemes. But this Thunderword differs from the others in two significant ways. One, unlike the previous 4 Thunderwords, this one occurs not at the end of the paragraph as an emphatic and dramatic exclamation, but in the middle as part of the paragraph's ongoing flow. You almost wouldn't notice it's a Thunderword, so little attention does it call to itself. In this sense, it draws more on ALP's work behind the scenes than on HCE's all too publicized activities. And by not ending the paragraph as the previous Thunderwords did, this very different Thunderword draws on ALP's continuously flowing nature, her river-running character. 2. The previous Thunderwords centered on one word or concept and mashed together various polylingual phonemes that related to it. Thunderwords 1 and 2 are comprised of words and phonemes meaning thunder. Thunderwords 3 and 4 mostly center on words and phonemes for shit and whore, respectively. Today's Thunderword, on the other hand, Thunderword number 5, seems more narrative than conceptual, more open to interpretation than singularly focused, more out for a walk than rooted in place, more rolling, gentle, spread out thunder, if you will, than sharp, shocking crack. Let's take a look at it. But first, since my tongue gets too twisted, here's a preview of Richard Harte reading it from today's excerpt.
Think crookly X in every pasture, 6 dicks like and him around ours, the maggoty can, with down mind looking gated.
As with everything in Finnegans Wake, there are many ways to interpret this Thunderword. For example, women and literature are 2 themes that emerge here, especially in light of this paragraph's recurring motif, she writes or schwrites, i.e. she for women and writes for literature. For women, we can tease out phonemes and words like hin for hen, Eve for womankind's biblical forebear, hers, magger for Maggie, can for the energetic female dance. For literature, we can tease out ingr or ink, krukli for the Norwegian trikke, meaning print, egsi for essay, past for post, i.e. mailing letters, stem for Shem the penman, ALP's writer-son, whom we'll see more of as the wake continues, magger for magazine, inkink for, well, ink and more ink, lu for lu, which is French for reading, aided for edit. And I want to give a shout out for these literary interpretations to the role of thunder in Finnegans Wake by son of Marshall McLuhan, Eric McLuhan, whose own son, incidentally, attended the reading you're about to hear. In this female epistolary Thunderword, I also see elements of Eve and Adam, whom we met in the opening line of Finnegans Wake, and the sneaky serpent to whom we owe humanity's loss of paradise, our fall, our original sin of sex. Through this lens of ALP and HCE as our imperfect biblical ancestors, Eve and Adam, we can tease out thing crookly X for the crooked sexual snake, Eve for Eve, naturally, repast for Eve's first repast, i.e. the forbidden fruit commonly depicted as an apple, pasture for the Garden of Eden, and down-mind-looking gated for Eve and Adam, having fallen, now locked out of paradise, looking down, perhaps as painted by Renaissance artists Masaccio or Hieronymus Bosch, whose images I'll include in the transcript. This suggestion of humanity's sexual fall also helps account for the, quote, dicks in this 100-letter word. So chapter 5 of Finnegans Wake isn't all hen, it's also cock. Now it's time for Richard's performance of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, page 109, line 1, to page 114, line 20 of chapter 5. The performance was filmed and recorded at the Thomas Fisher Rare Books Library, University of Toronto, on October 21st, 2024, with a live audience. And since today's excerpt could easily be titled The Letter, the brief opening music you'll hear, which I wrote for piano trio with Tyler Imond on bass and Janu Isaac on drums, loosely quotes Joe Cocker's 1970 hit, The Letter.
Luckily, there is another cant to the question. Has any fellow of the dime a dozen type, it might, with some profit, some dull evening, quietly be hinted, has any usual sort of ordinary josser, flat-chested, 40-ish, faintly flatulent, and given to ratiocination by syncopation in the elucidation of complications, of his greatest fun-yang dyna descendants, only another the son of, in fact, ever looked sufficiently longly at a quite everyday-looking, stamped, addressed envelope? Admittedly, it is an outer husk. Its face, in all its featureful perfection of imperfection, is its fortune. It exhibits only the civil or military clothing of whatever passion-pallid nudity or plague-purple nakedness may happen to tuck itself under its flap. Yet, to concentrate solely on the literal sense, or even the psychological content of any document, to the sore neglect of the enveloping facts circumstantiating it, is just as hurtful to sound sense, and let it be added to the truest taste, as were some fellow in the act of perhaps getting an intro from another fellow, turning out to be a friend in need of his, say, to a lady of the latter's acquaintance, engaged in performing the elaborate ancestral ceremony of the upstairs, straightway to run off and vision her plump and plain and unnatural altogether, preferring to close his blink-hard's eyes to the ethical fact that she was, after all, for the space of the time being, some definite articles of evolutionary clothing. In harmonious creations, a captious critic might describe them as, or not strictly necessary, or a trifle irritating here and there, but for all that, suddenly full of local colour and personal perfume, and suggestive, too, of so very much more, and capable of being stretched, filled out, if need or wish were, of having their surprising-like coincidental parts separated, don't they know, for better survey by the deft hand of an expert, don't you know, who in his heart doubts either that the facts of feminine clothiering are there all the time, or that the feminine fiction, stranger than the facts, are there also at the same time, only a little to the rear? Or that one may be separated from the other, or that both may be then contemplated simultaneously, or that each may be taken up and considered in turn, apart from the other. Here, let a few artifacts fend in their own favour. The river felt she wanted salt. That was just where Brian came in. The country asked for bear's paw for dindin, and bound and abounding it got it sorely. We who live under heaven, we of a clovery kingdom, We middle sins people have often watched the sky overreaching the land. We suddenly have. Our isle is Sange, the place. That stern chuckler, mayhap not, once said to Repetition in that Lutheran conservatory way of his, that is it chapel as it a Lucan was the one place, alt out nolt, in this mad val of tares, whose verdure yellowed there ever fighting parks his car, and his tamaloised tay is the drame of Philius, where the possible was the improbable, and the improbable the inevitable. If the proverbial bishop of our holy and undivided with this may can or no may can, zot is the quiz tune, ever mashed at his toenails on the head, we are in for a sequentiality of improbable possibles. Though possibly nobody, after having grubbed up a lock of cold corn above his subject, probably in Aristocles or the Bible, will go out of his way to applaud him on the unbiased back of his remark. For utterly impossible as are all these events, they are probably as like those which may have taken place as any others which never took person at all are ever likely to be. Aha! About that original hen. Midwinter, fruer or cooer, was in the offing, and prem ver a promise of April, when, as Kiskabrigi sang life's owl, sa hat song, an ice-clad shiverer, merest of bantlings, observed a cold fowl behaviorizing strangely on that fatal midden, or chip factory, or comical bottom cop's jute, dump for short, afterwards changed into the orangery, when in the course of deeper demolition, unexpectedly one bushman's holiday, its lemons threw up a few spontaneous fragments of orange peel, the last remains of an outdoor meal by some unknown sunseeker or place hider, illico way back in his mistral past. What child of a strand looper but keepy little Kevin, in the despondful surrounding of such sneezing cold, would ever have troved up on a strait that was called street a motive for future sanctity by euchering the finding of the Ardagh Chalice by another haily innocent and beach walker, whilst trying with pious clamour to wheedle teeper raw potatoes out of New Zealand in spite of the patch purple of the massacre. A duel to die today, God damn and big God, sticks and stanks of most of the Jacobiters. The bird in the case was Belinda of the Dorans, a more than quinquagenarian. There's his prize with Cerny medal, Chippelizzy's hay exposition. And what she was scratching at the hour of clocking 12, look for all the zog-zag world like a goodish-sized sheet of letter paper. Originating by transshipped from Boston, Mass, of the last of the first two, dear, whom it proceeded to mention, Maggie well, and all at home's health well, only the hate toward the mild on the Van Houtens and the general's elections, with a lovely face of some born gentleman, with a beautiful present of wedding cakes for dear thank you, Christy, and with grand fun for all of poor Father Michael. Don't forget unto life's and Muggy well. How are you, Maggie? And hope soon to hear well, and must now close it with fondest to the two winds, with 4 cross kisses for Holy Paul, Holy Comer, Holy Poly, Holy Island. P.S. from Locust may eat all, but this sign shall they never. Affectionate, large-looking touch of titch. The stain, and that a tea stain. The over-cartlessness of the master builder here, as usual, signing the page away, marked it off on the spout of the moment as a genuine relic of ancient Irish pleasant pottery of that ladylike languishing class known as a hurry me o'er the hazy. Why then how? Well, almost any photoist worth his chemicots will tip anyone asking him to tease her that if a negative of a horse happens to melt enough while drying, well, what you do get is, well, positively, grotesquely distorted macramas of all sorts of horse-happy values and masses of melt while horse. Tip. Well, this really is what must have occurred to our missive. There's a sort of a turd for you, please. Wisp off the grass. Unfilthed from the butcher by the sagacity of a look-me little like-me long head. Heated residence in the heart of the orange-flavoured mud mound had partly obliterated the negative to start with, causing some features palpably near your pecker to be swollen up most grossly, while the farther back we manage to wiggle, the more we need a loan of a lens to see as much as the hen saw. Tip. You was feeling like you was lost at the bush, boy? You says, it is a puling sample jungle of woods. You most shouts out, be thick at me for the stump of a beach if I have the paltriest notions what the fairest here means. Gee up, girlie. The quad gospelers may own the Targum, but any of the Zingardi Shulera may pick a peck of kindlings yet from the sack of old hen's wine. Lead, kindly fowl. They always did. Ask the ages what bird has done yesterday, man may do next year. Be it fly, be it moult, be it hatch, be it agreement in the nest. For her social scientific sense is as sound as a bell, sir. Her volucrine auto-mutativeness right on normalcy. She knows. She just feels she was kind of born to lay and love eggs. Trust her to propagate the species and hoosh her fluffballs safe through din of danger. Lastly, but mostly, in her genetic field, it is no game and no gammon. She is ladylike in everything she does and plays the gentleman's part every time. Let us auspice it. Yes, before all this has time to end, the golden age must return with its vengeance. Man will become dirigible. Ague will be rejuvenated. Woman with her ridiculous white burden will reach by one step sublime incubation, the main wanting human lioness. With her dishoard discipular man ram will lie down together publicly, flank upon fleece. No, assuredly, they are not justified, those gloom pourers who grouse that letters haven't been quite their old selves again since that weird weekday in bleak Janavere. Yet how palmy Dayton a waste oasis when, to the shock of both, Biddy Doran looked at literature. And she may be a mere Marcella, this midget majesty, mistress of earths, but it is not a hear or say of some enamorous letter signed Toga Girilis. Teasy dear, we have a cup of her fist right against our nozzlebus. We note the paper with her jotty young watermark, Notre Dame du Bon Marché. And she has a heart of Aaron. What Lumalil says she falls with her Falaman ears and her Nadia nods, as a straw will show she does the wind blag, recting to show the rudeness of a robber, curling and hewing the fansetties of a frisette. But how many of her readers realise that she is not out to dizzle-dazzle with a great uncoutrement of post-Mantuan glossaries from the Lapins and the Greeks? Nothing's on her wild life. Grab our good and grandy for old Almenium etymologists like Dario Marius and Zova Trimav Serov Merav Meruvian. She feel plain, one flat fact thing, and if, last ways first wise, A man alone sign any and Uthras has no rates to done a kick at with any ananikers about tutus, milk and fours, and the rearers on the outer and asking the tutus to be far harder. Think crookly X in every pasture, six dicks likens him around hers, the magabby can, with down mind looking gated. Mes dames, mademoiselles, mes serfs, silver pay. All she wants, she writes, is tell the cock's truth about him. Cap-pack, cap-puck. No menzies matter. He had to see life foully, the plaque and the smut. She writes. There were 3 men in him. She writes. Dancings, she writes, was his only 2 feebles, with apple harlots, and a little mole vogels, specially. She writes, when they peaches, honey's war camellia paints. Yours very truthful, add dapple in. Yet is it but an old story, a tale of a tree stung with one he sawed, of a man's held by tent pegs, and his pal, whether loosed on the run, what cad man could, but bad man wouldn't. Any Genoa man against any Venus, and why Kate takes charge of the waxworks. Let us now, weather, health, dangers, public orders, and other circumstances permitting, but perfectly convenient, if you please. After you, please. Pardoning my, ich bin so flesk bay. Drop this jiggery-pokery and talk straight turkey, meat to bait. For while the ear, be we my cause or Nicholasts, may sometimes be inclined to believe, others the eye, whether brown or no lens, find it devilish and hard now again even to believe itself. Habis oris et num vidibus, habis oculus et mena palpabuat. Tip, drawing nearer to it, to take our slant at it, since after all it has met with misfortune while all underground. Let us see all there may remain to be seen. I am a worker, a tombstone mason, anxious to police every burlies and jolly glad when Christmas comes as once a year. You are a poor Joyist, unctuous to police no bobbies, and tunny belly solely when 'tis time to call home gin. We cannot say eye to eye. We cannot smile nose from nose. Still, one cannot help noticing that rather more than half of the lines run north-south in the Nemses Bucharest directions, while the others go westies in search from Malazais with Bulgarid. For tiny tot though it looks when nistling alongside other incandabula, it has its cardinal points for all that. These ruled barriers along which the traced words run, march, halt, walk, stumble at doubtful points, stumble up again in comparative safety, seem to have been drawn first of all in a pretty checker with lamp black and black thorn. Such crossing is anti-Christian, of course, but the use of the home-born shillelagh as an aid to calligraphy shows a distinct advance from savagery to barbarism. It is seriously believed by some that the intention may have been geodetic, or in the view of the canny or domestic economicals, but by writing thitherways, end to end, and turning, and end to end hitherways, writing, and with lines of letters slittering up, but loads of letters slittering down, they'll see me to my place, and jump it back again, from them that rise to homelit sleep. Where in the waste is the wisdom?
That was Richard Harte reading pages 109 to 114 from Chapter 5 of Finnegans Wake, recorded live at the Fisher Rare Book Library in Toronto on October 21st, 2024. Join us for episode 26 in a fortnight for Richard Harte's continuation of Chapter 5. In the meantime, to be sure you don't miss the episode, why not follow or subscribe to this podcast? For more on One Little Goat's Finnegans Wake project, including transcripts of this podcast and the complete films of chapters 1, 2, and 3, visit our website at onelittlegoat.org. And to hear about upcoming performances and screenings, join our mailing list also on our website. One Little Goat Theatre Company is a non-profit, artist-driven, registered charity in the United States and Canada that depends on donations from individuals to make our productions, including this one, possible. If you're able, please make a tax-deductible donation through our website, www.onelittlegoat.org. Finnegans Wake is made possible by Friends of One Little Goat Theatre Company and the Immigrant Support Program of the Government of Ireland. Thank you for your support. And thank you to the artists for this episode. Richard Harte, sound by William Bembridge, stage management by Sandy Becker, directed by yours truly, Adam Seelig. Music arranged and performed on the piano by me, with Tyler Imam on bass and Janu Isaac on drums, recorded at Ghost Town Studio in Toronto. A big thanks to John Shoesmith, Special Collections Librarian, to David Fernandez, Head of Rare Books and Special Collections, and to their colleagues at the Fisher Rare Book Library at the University of Toronto, as well as to our wonderful live audience. Thank you to the team at the Irish Consulate in Toronto, and thank you to production consultants Kathy Murphy and Andrew Moody. Thank you for listening.